So here's a book which is being made into a motion picture by Warner Brothers. It's a book by Roman Gordon. So here's an extract from it. I suppose one day I shall settle down with it, or it may even become humdrum, thought Fanny. But she knew it never would. It was too piercing. No, she did not know why or when, but she could a little trace out where. Margot gave a dinner, thought Fanny. Odd of Margot to ask you when Daryl is away, Lady Candida had said. She needs an extra woman, and there are no single women living in this village of single women, I suppose. But Fanny knew why Margot had asked her. She could be trusted not to get in the way. Margot had got Rob. She talked of getting people as if she were catching butterflies. And I have got Rob Quillette, she told Fanny on the telephone. But you were unkind, Fanny told Rob. Margot thought you were really interested. She knew enough to know it wasn't likely you could dine out. You would dine out when you were in the middle of a picture. I came because she said you would be there, said Rob. I wanted to look at you again. And you did look at me all through dinner. Fanny had always been ashamed of how far behind she was with books and plays and fashions and facts. Darrell sometimes said, though kindly, you dream too much. At that dinner, Margot had talked to the new Swedish film Skargard, the archipelago. I haven't seen it, Fanny had to say. But Fanny, everybody's seen it. Who is everybody? Asked Rob. But Margot did not hear. It's a religious conflict after the abortion that makes it so tropical. That makes it too topical, she was saying earnestly. That superb shot of the girl racked with pain on the edge of that pretty little bed that had been hers as a child. Fanny knew enough now to burn for Margot. After all, we were brought up. At least Aunt Isabel brought me up not to talk to a doctor about illnesses, to a judge about his trials. But Margot had not been worrying Rob. He had simply not been listening. He seemed curiously abstracted and fidgety, twisting his wine glass, shamefully maltreating Sydney's splendid Chamboil Musigny. Sydney must have been thinking that film people were vandals and that Margot's party was not being the success she had hoped. And Fanny had wondered what was the matter with this dark stranger. Dark stranger sounded like Fortune reading in a teacup, but it was as she thought of him. Why was he abstracted? His hand had left the wine glass and was playing with the roses in the crystal bowl lit with a green light. When suddenly interrupting Sydney, he had leaned forward across the table that Margot had arranged so carefully. Crystal candlesticks with black shades, black porcelain, salt cellars, and pepper pots, black plates, the lit roses, and he asked, is there a rose called Flanny Clavering? There isn't, there ought to be. That was all over the village by the morning, Fanny told him. Sarah Ogilvy, Sarah Ogilvy was in the room. We could never have a party without Sarah Ogilvy to help us. She went to each of us in turn, and it was in turn, said Fanny, a kind of tit for tat. I asked you, it's your turn to ask me. Dinner for dinner, drinks for drinks. For heaven's sake, said Rob. It had been all over the village. The voices could not reach Fanny in the villa, though she had shut her ears and her mind to them for a long time. All this last year, they had always been there, Not to begin with anyone outside, not even Anthea or Margot, because they did not really know, thought Fanny, until I left Stebbins for good. But they were important voices, intimate, that had ruled her life. Darrell, Aunt Isabel, Lady Candida, and suddenly she thought, I shall never have to listen to Lady Candida again. There was one voice Fanny could not shut out. Her own. I know now, said Fanny, that people do have a voice of conscience. It had spoken clearly, steadily all this time. She had not been able to stifle it, only refused to listen, and she had not listened to it that morning after the dinner when Rod had telephoned. Rod, Rob Willett here. His voice had sounded curt, almost clipped. Will you have dinner with me? I? Such complete surprise had showed in Fanny's voice that Rob told her afterwards he had not been able to help smiling. A pause then. I think perhaps you are confusing me with Margot Devanant, said Fanny gently. I most certainly am not. Will you come? There had been a longer pause before Fanny answered him. Clearly and insistently, that voice was saying, no, don't go, and there will be trouble. But instead of listening, she had scolded herself. You are being ridiculous. Are you turning into one of those middle aged women who imagine that any man, it's simply that he is bored in Whitcross, she told herself, though it did not seem likely in the middle of hazel to harvest. And the voice still said, don't go, Fanny went. Fanny went. It had been another Sunday, and as Rob waited for her in the hall, she had run up for a handkerchief. Idly, he had looked at three letters ready for the post on the table. H.D. Clavering, The Schoolhouse, Strode, Wiltshire. Miss Philippa Clavering, St. Anne's School, Bentry, Kent. Miss Candida Clavering, St. Anne's School. My children, Fanny had explained. Do you write to them every Sunday as if you were at school too? Rob had asked. She had not thought of it that way, as if she was too bound, as if she too were bound by a set of rules. Yet I suppose I was, thought Fanny. Even then, by that first going out with him, she felt as if she was breaking one. Children bound one into a rule, thought Fanny, and if you hadn't sent us to boarding school, this wouldn't have happened, said Caddy. Rob never came to Stebbings again. It wouldn't have been fair, he said, though none of it was fair, of course. At least it made me feel a little less guilty when I had you on my own ground.